But I will say, do beware of the power creep that comes with Orisa, because she's been slowly getting buffs over time. She could instantly shoot up to meta at any moment, especially if the other tanks get nerfed.
Many months later.
Oh, this is the Overwatch I live for, baby! Woo! More Orisa microbuffs! I need them! I haven't played tank in weeks, and this is the exact invigorating boost I needed to want to play again. Hell yeah, that's true Overwatch right there. Two Orisas just banging their nuts against each other.
I was right about Orisa. She was gonna get slowly power crept, fall under everyone's radar, then all of a sudden, she'd shoot up to being one of the most meta tanks in the game as soon as the other tanks got nerfed. Even mainstream content creators are talking about the rise of Orisa. But why? How has Orisa gone under the radar for so long? Will she get nerfed in the future? And what do we do about Orisa, if anything? Firstly, it's gonna be useful to look at Orisa's history. When the rework first came out, people were generally pretty positive. She shifted away from being the boring shield and shoot tank who partially enabled the double shield meta to a proactive, cyclical brawl tank who specialized in sustain and CC. The Javelin certainly felt innovative and satisfying to land, but we'll talk about the Javelin later. Most people put her high up in their tier lists during Season 1 and Season 2 because her matchups into the most meta tanks at the time, being Doomfist and Hog, was pretty decent. However, the second her range got nerfed, it dropped off a cliff. Still though, Orisa's most broken state has to be in Stage 2 earlier this year, where in January, Orisa had her fall off completely removed.
Yeah, I think Orisa is just fucking OP, to be honest. Like, simple as that. Orisa is just better than Monkey. She's better at shooting. She has a good ult, I think. I think spears matter a lot. I think it's like a really high one-shot potential as well. Yeah, I think Orisa is just better overall, to be honest. Bubble just doesn't matter. Monkey just gets like mowed down.
Her dominance eventually led to the massive Orisa Giga nerf on April 30th this year, where her fortify duration got reduced by a second, her spear spin cooldown got increased by 2 seconds, and she moves 20% slower during fortify. This nerf was so big that Javid News, the executive producer of Overwatch 2, said, "I mourn with you, fellow Orisa enjoyers." This gives me the perfect segue to start looking into Orisa's silent power creep over the last few months. Get ready because this is going to be a lot of changes. The first one was on June the 20th, where Orisa got a slight revert in her spear spin cooldown. The second change was 3 weeks later on July 9th, where again she got a slight revert on her fortify duration, increasing it by half a second. The third and arguably most important change to her was to her Javelin, increasing the impact damage by 20. And the last change was a final revert to Orisa's movement speed penalty, which got halved. We also can't forget the armor and tank changes. Back then, armor just removed a flat 30% off all damage types, but now it's a flat 7 damage. There's also the 25% damage reduction in headshots, which wasn't present back in April. Now you could argue that this was an overall nerf since April, which is up for debate. However, for argument's sake, let's say Orisa is worse than where she was in April. How has she yet again become the meta tank? Well, there's 3 big reasons. Orisa's kill threat, Orisa's tank matchups, and the impact of Juno. This section is going to be pretty simple and comes down to Orisa's Javelin and still her lack of fall off. In the background, you're going to be seeing some pro Orisa play, showing how impactful that Javelin is. Even though a 20 damage increase doesn't seem like much on the surface, that can be the tipping point for getting a kill or forcing out a key cooldown. There isn't much more to it than that, to be honest. It's just a super consistent source of value for top level players, and why in lower level play, if you're not hitting your javelins, you're just missing out a massive part of Orisa's kit. Now I want to talk about Orisa's tank matchups, and why, even in her suboptimal matchups, she can still do very well. Orisa vs Sigma. Now Sigma has historically been used as a quote-unquote counter to Orisa, mainly because his rock goes through Orisa's spear spin and it shortens her cycle. However, because of Juno, which I'll get into, Sigma just kinda gets ran over and he's got nowhere near the sustain that Orisa has due to her fortify and armor pool. Not to mention, one of Sigma's biggest strengths as a tank is marking ranged hitscan threats, but with hitscan being in its weakest state historically, and some teams opting for a double flex DPS comp, that unique aspect of Sigma is lessened. Briggs Valley also poses an issue if you're being rushed on. I was initially taken back by how little Ramattra we've seen over the last week or two, especially considering that the last time we saw an Orisa meta, Ram was also being played. So what changed? Well, the main reason is Ram's reachability. What I mean by reachability is that it's super hard for Ram to reach anyone in the Brig Juno comp because he can't really block CC, and he's got low CC himself. If you pop Nemesis form and try to walk, you can get whip-shotted away, spear spinned away, and javelined away. You can see here in this clip, TVNT tries to walk and gets Lucio booped, mace load, venture burrowed, and javelins. Your block only blocks damage from the front as well, whereas for Fortify, it's 360. You can actually see TVNT swap to Orisa after he dies here on Ram. In short, Orisa just has similar poke, arguably better sustain, more CC, more resistance to CC, and a better one-shot potential. Orisa vs Zarya. Now I have to mention this one for the gold players in my audience, who might just be like, Zarya counters Orisa, just beam her foreheads. Unfortunately, that's not quite how it works. There's 8 other people playing that needs to be accounted for. Now there's already issues by just assuming that Zarya can beam down the Orisa and win, but for simplicity, let's say that's true. You still have to deal with Zarya's awful sustain, lack of armor, and the 5 trillion other comps that can beat you. Mei comps in particular can just insta-kill a Zarya, and of course you could run some kind of a dive comp with Winston, and that can work too. Orisa vs Queen. This one is interesting because some teams have actually started to play more Queen. Now Cuffy, a tier 2 coach, did tell me about his Queen theory privately, but hopefully I should be allowed to say this in public. In short, the Queen team plays to burn the CDs of the Orisa, either by poke or by Queen knife, and then after the Orisa CDs have been burnt, Queen should be better in the brawl. We saw Gambit 2 days ago try and play Zen Queen, using the Zen spam to pressure Orisa CDs to give the Queen more leeway. We even saw O3 Splash in America try do it, but with an Echo variation instead of the Zen. In this example, the Echo spams the Orisa from distance, which forces the Orisa to turn, which allows the Queen to get a good knife. Romani gets the Fortify out with his knife, which allow him to just walk up on point and almost kill the Orisa outright. So why isn't Queen being played universally? Well, in short, Queen sustain is minimal. No armor, low standard HP, and a Juno Kiriko backline can stop your ultimate entirely. We saw this with Gambit, where the Queen gets melted before the Juno can even get the Ray down, meaning that the Ray was wasted. Orisa vs DVa. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. The other tanks are either obvious, or they're dive tanks being played on dive maps, where Orisa is not currently being played. DVa did get a pretty big nerf to our Hypering Boosters combo, which I believe was listed as a bug fix, and that basically gave DVa the ability to explode onto anyone anywhere. Now that's no longer the case, and DVa's general brawl power is significantly less than Orisa's. She doesn't really have that burst damage kill threat anymore, and especially on brawl maps like Lijiang, you're seeing teams like Piece of Cake run over the DVa. Of course, on maps where you can get value out of your boosters, and it's hard for Orisa to walk or bunker, that's when DVa gets the upper hand, but that's super map dependent. Of course, I couldn't make this video without talking about Juno. The reality is, Juno is the best support in the game at the moment, and I could do a separate video about her entirely. But the way this relates to Orisa is how well Juno synergizes with ground tanks in general. This is mainly through her orbital ray, ever since the bug fix to her hypering, and with Orisa, you can spear spin people out of their own orbital ray into your one, and you can kite orbital rays decently well. You also do an insane amount of damage, so there's that. There's also Juno's mobility, making her much more slippery when playing into tanks like Ramattra or Ryan. I can't help but think that if Juno didn't exist and Lucio Bap or Lucio Kiri was being played, we would at least see more tank variety in that of Sigma and Ramattra, similar to Stage 2. So should we do anything about Orisa? Well, I would begin by nerfing Juno first, and then seeing how it plays out from there. I think the moment we start seeing more Bap Lucio being played, and even ranged hit scans, tanks like Sigma can actually serve a purpose by marking the Baptiste and not getting completely ran over. Maybe there's a discussion to be had on the power of a javelin, but considering you need a good amount of mechanical skill to consistently land it, I think the cost to reward dynamic isn't too far off. At least it's good that the devs are putting more emphasis on the mechanical skill ceiling of Orisa and not just her cooldowns. That's it for the video. As always, let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time,